Thank you very much. It's great to be here. My name is Larry Lunetta, as I was introduced. I am now celebrating my one-year anniversary with Aruba, which is exciting to be here with you. I arrived via an acquisition that Aruba made of a company I was with called Niara, and we'll talk a bit about the technologies associated with that, but think of it as using artificial intelligence and behavioral analytics for attack detection. And I wanted to share with you that even the first day I joined Aruba, when I asked about go-to-market and partners, repeatedly SecureLink came up as our key go-to-market partner on a global basis. And as I'll talk about, Aruba is a very large organization. But when it comes to security and the underlying technologies that support that, as I said, over and over, SecureLink came up as the partner that we wanted to learn from, that we wanted to do more business with. So it's exciting for me and thrilling to be here as part of this event, and I appreciate you coming to hear what I have to say. So I give you a lot of credit as an audience member in these events. I've sat through some of the keynotes, and you're hearing a lot about loops and fabrics and frameworks and circles, and you'll hear a bit more about it today. It seems like every vendor has its own version of that. And in defense of us as vendors, I will say that we recognize and have for a while that deploying single point products for security solutions is a difficult task. And on behalf of you, in terms of allocating scarce resources, both monetary and people, having those products integrate, fit together, form a better protection together than apart is part of why you're hearing so much about those constructs. The other thing is that these frameworks are intended to knit products together. And what I'm going to talk about today is a framework that we hope will help you think about your process and how you integrate new products and technologies, how you allocate resources, and how you deal with the overall problem of cyber attacks. It's called active cyber defense. And it's a very simple framework, at least to talk about, perhaps more difficult to implement, but many customers that we work with are finding this framework very helpful in terms of, as I said, allocating resources and dealing with the problems you face in cybersecurity. And then finally, I wanted to put it in the context of a business outcome. And in this case, it's a business outcome that Aruba, as you heard, is very close to, and that is the digital workplace. And we'll talk about what the digital workplace is, the security implications of the digital workplace, and how active cyber defense can contribute to protecting that emerging work style, technology footprint, et cetera. So I wanted to tell you, if you weren't familiar with Aruba, a little bit about the company, but first I wanted to do some market research. So if you'll help me out, I have a couple of questions, and you can vote more than once. So if you think of Aruba, how many of you think of us as a wireless network company? Put your hands up. Okay. How many of you think of us as a general networking company, wired and wireless? Okay. How many of you think of us as a security company? Oh, very good. Makes my heart glad. So Aruba is a classic Silicon Valley success story. The company just celebrated its 16th anniversary. It was founded in Santa Clara, California in 2002. It went public in 2007. And the company was acquired in 2015 by Hewlett-Packard Enterprises. And in fact, we are a wholly owned company of Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, and the business now generates almost $3 billion in revenue. So in 16 years, it's gone from 0 to $3 billion. And more impressive is that the founder of Aruba still leads the business. Kirti Milkoti has led this company from day one, and today is president of the business unit for HPE that is responsible for what we call the intelligent edge. And that includes wired and wireless networking, compute, and security. So I always get asked, and it's an obvious question, was Aruba named after the island off the coast of South America? The answer is yes. Kirti liked to name companies after attractive destinations, and he settled on Aruba. So that's why not only do we carry the name Aruba, our corporate colors are orange, based on the Dutch affiliation. So I'm not often able to wear my orange sweater, but when I come here, it's a good thing. So let's very quickly talk some definitions. So what's the digital workplace? It's what you all, I think, are experiencing. The idea that employees, partners, et cetera, customers want to engage how they want to engage. It's a more mobile experience. It's a more open experience. And the idea is to improve employee productivity and customer satisfaction. And when we talk to organizations around the world, many have either arrived at what they call the digital workplace or are moving towards that. But for a security professional, as you've heard, again, in many of these presentations, the digital workplace opens up a whole host of problems from a security perspective. The attack surface becomes almost infinite. You're connecting devices that you may or may not know about, from mobile to BYOD. The flood of things, IoT, coming onto the network, creates tremendous problems. And you have attacks that are designed to exploit those kinds of vulnerabilities. Attacks that look for co-opting legitimate credentials, that take days, weeks, or months to gestate before they do damage. And they are designed to evade the traditional security defenses. So you mix that in with what everyone knows is a skills shortage. As we say in the United States, you can't even throw bodies at this because they don't exist. In the next several years, there will be up to 3 million jobs in cybersecurity that are unfilled. So you have this squeeze of difficulty in finding resources with a much more difficult attack environment. And that's the challenge that I'll talk about in the context of active cyber defense. So this is deceptively simple, as I said, and it's actually modeled after the framework that pilots use to train. They call it OODA: observe, orient, decide, and act. Several years ago, a number of very experienced cybersecurity professionals got together and cast that into a context for the security environment. And the 4 steps are sensing, sense-making, then decision-making, and action. And this framework is very helpful, as I said, when we deal with customers in terms of prioritizing resources, introducing new technologies, diagnosing where process can be improved, and overall helping plan forward thinking from a cybersecurity perspective. I'll go through each of these steps in a bit of detail, and it may look overwhelming when we finally get down into the details, but I'll tell you that this is a framework that isn't applied universally to every part of the organization and every cybersecurity problem. Mostly, organizations start with focus on high-value actors and high-value assets, which means that the working set is smaller. They can get experience in implementing this kind of framework. And a little bit later, I'll talk about everyone's favorite subject here, GDPR, and how this framework, I think, can help with the security part of that regulation. So let's talk about sensing. So the good news here is that there are a lot of opportunities to collect information about your IT environment and the activity inside your IT environment. And it's only getting better, but it's also getting more. So the challenge with this kind of framework is collecting all the data you'd like to collect and analyze and having the resources to do that. So one of the things that you'll see as an attribute of the technology supporting this framework are big data platforms platforms that feature Hadoop and Spark, which scale both from a compute and a storage perspective very easily. So, where do you see the opportunity to sense what's going on in your IT environment? Well, certainly there are logs. Almost every IT product, application, service creates some sort of signature about their activity. And most of you are familiar with collecting logs, whether it's in Splunk or a SIM or whatever, and making good use of them. And certainly other security products create alerts. You know, they see something wrong. That's part of the sensing. Increasingly, context is available as well. It's not just about an IP address. It's who's the user associated with that IP address? What kind of device is associated with that IP address? So now products are giving you much more context around those basic pieces of information. And then finally, the network, which has always been a great source of truth about IT activity, is actually getting better. And the interesting thing is that networking products like wireless access points and switches are now delivering security-relevant information off the streams of data that they're seeing. So you now have not only the network as a sensor, but you have the network as an active participant in detecting security violations or security problems. Now that's all the good news, and other than the amount of platform you need to collect and analyze that, this is basically free. The bad news is where you are most vulnerable going forward is the place where you don't get this kind of visibility, and that's the world of IoT. Nobody designs a vending machine thinking they're going to have to log information for either operational or security purposes. The same with a heart monitor, the same for a factory sensor. So just like if you were here yesterday and heard the presentation on cloud, you have to infer activity from things. And that's where, again, the network is very important. So that's the idea of sensing, seeing what's going on. The next thing is, all right, I have billions of events a day that I'm looking at. How do I understand what's there? How do I see the attacks that are hidden in all that information? Well, the answer is analytics. And you all have been using analytics in one form or another for a long time. They could be rules. They could be pattern matches. It could be statistics. The thing about those techniques is they're looking for the known. They're designed to find attack profiles that someone else has discovered. And they're all great. The products that you have in your environment to do this are very important, very valuable, and continue to do a great job. But there are, as I said, those attacks that get past all that. So now there's a second dimension that is very popular here in terms of vendors and others talking about it, a second dimension of analytics. This is artificial intelligence, machine learning. These techniques use mathematical algorithms not to look for what we know about, but to look for what we haven't seen before. And how is that done? Well, instead of looking for, and my favorite example, if you're familiar with SIM, is this. A SIM rule looking for a brute force attack on an account is, I want to see 5 failed logins in 60 seconds. And the idea is if you see that, it's likely somebody trying to hack into an account. Well, what happens if those 5 failed logins happen in 61 seconds? That rule, in the parlance, will not fire. You'll not see that. But if you're looking for abnormal behavior, which is what the machine learning is designed to do, you'll see that as a change in behavior, as that user has never done that before. So that's what artificial intelligence provides. That's the value. It's the second dimension of analytics. It's the complement to what you already have. It doesn't replace what you have, and it doesn't, as we'll talk about, replace the analyst. It just gives you another dimension of visibility into behaviors that ordinarily you would never see. And there's a whole body of artificial intelligence technologies that are designed to basically reduce white noise, focus your staff on the attacks that matter. And that's where the sense-making is supported by analytics. So as I said, the goal here is not to produce a driverless car any more than anyone would get on an airplane knowing that there are no pilots in the cockpit. That doesn't mean that we can't make pilots better or we can't make security analysts better. That's the whole goal here, because why? You can't have enough security analysts. And I've spoken to a number of you who say, well, we don't really have security analysts. We do security part-time. Well, this is a way to make whatever resource you have better. So this whole idea of decision-making is central to attack detection and response. And it's not just, here's an alert, figure it out. It's, here's the right alert because we've done the right analysis, and here's the information you need to validate that and figure out what you want to do about it. So as I mentioned, the data that drives the analytics does another job, which is to support the decision-making of the analyst. But that doesn't happen magically either. You need to have, in that platform, that data aggregation environment, capabilities that will extract the right forensic information and present it to the analyst in a way that can be consumed easily and acted on. So that's where you convert from the automation at the front end of the process to the more manual involvement of the analyst to decide what to do. So it's everything from having the right data to presenting it in the right way, and also having the workflows codified in a way that you can take a level one analyst, perhaps a more junior person, and sit that person into this workflow and have them be able to execute like a more senior person, to capture those best practices in a way that they can be reused. And the whole goal here is to go from alert to response and remediation in as fast a fashion as possible. So the other change, I think, in this world of security has to do with action. So once the analyst decides what's going on, how serious it is, and what actions they need to take, they have to implement that plan. So typically, that has been an exclusively manual process. So I always stop here and I ask the question, how many of you remember the conversion from IDS to IPS? I don't see any hands. Hey, I may be old, but you're not teenagers. Some of you must have seen that. So if you remember in the mid-2000s, the conversion of IDS to IPS, basically where IDS decided to take some action, it was the great wave that was going to convert everything into fully automated cybersecurity. Well, guess what? That never got implemented. And the reason is the action was binary. You either were on the network or you were off. And no security professional wanted to be in the position of programming a device that kept the CEO off the network or stopped the e-commerce traffic. So it was just simply ignored. Manual activity is still important. And the IT team has to work together to rapidly respond to attacks, whether it's the security team, the networking team, the desktop team, the services team, et cetera. And the more information you can provide and the more integration you can have, the faster that will go. Now, automation is back on the table. And why is it back on the table? Because there are products that many of you have in your network already in the form of access control, network access control, that can be used not only to put users and devices on the network, but you can also use those technologies to respond to attacks. And why is that practical? Because there's a range of actions that can be programmed in to those products. Everything from requiring a reauthentication to perhaps changing or throttling bandwidth or moving a device or user to a different part of the network. Then there's also the block. So the idea is that there's an adaptive or gradient set of actions that can be taken automatically. So you can have a product like a firewall or a SIM or a product that has artificial intelligence signal these network access control products, and yes, Aruba has one called ClearPass, and automatically take an action. but that doesn't mean someone's automatically off the network. So this idea of automating through this loop, is more and more practical given the technologies that are available. Now, I wanted to put this in practical terms because by my count, I think it's 78 days to May 25th, which is G-Day, GDPR Day in the EU. And I have to say that 6 months ago, GDPR was just an acronym to me, but after spending a lot of hours with documents from the Article 29 Working Party and other organizations, it's very clear that GDPR has a lot of moving parts. The speaker this morning talked about it as a combination of process, people, and technologies, and I think that's absolutely true. And as it comes to security, he also said there's very little in GDPR that prescribes security. In fact, the words are adequate security. But if you look at the processes that are required to be supported, there's clearly indications of how security should be organized. And I thought it would be helpful to look at active cyber defense and fit it into a GDPR framework. So let's start with sensing. GDPR at the front end has a process of identifying and cataloging and deciding whether or not you want to keep personal information and where you want to keep that. And as painful as that might be from a process and an investment standpoint, it actually is beneficial from a security standpoint. Because if you now know where the personal data is, what systems it's on, what databases it's on, what applications it's on, you can start to red circle that. You can start to protect it more aggressively using this framework. So that's number one. You can start to sense who's accessing it, what traffic is going in and out, what logs are telling you, et cetera, and start to feed that upstream into analytics that will be sensitive to the information it's receiving. So let me give you an example. The artificial intelligence models report a risk score, and these are basically programmed into the models. Now, there are ways to adjust it, and one good way to adjust it is based on the value of the asset that you're associated with. So, for example, if you have a model that fires with a risk score of 50 out of 100, you can tell that model, if this is a GDPR resource, I want to make that 100. I want to max that out, which will get the attention of the security team and drive process downstream. So you can adjust the sense making based on the fact that GDPR assets are involved. When it comes to decision making and action, I think you're all familiar with the 72-hour rule. And without getting into a lot of detail, the faster an analyst can see the problem, understand who's affected, how widespread the breach is, and what the circumstances were, the faster that can happen, the more information goes to the data privacy officer who needs to report that breach. So you can start to see how this process can be fit into business priorities based on how the technologies are deployed and based on how you organize your cybersecurity processes and resources. So that's a very quick flyover on active cyber defense. I wanted to give you just a bit about Aruba and security. Given our business and our products and our technologies, we're pretty uniquely positioned at the intersection of connectivity, control, and analytics to give you the next generation of protection that you need for the kinds of attacks that unfortunately make the headlines and now are leading to increasingly strong financial implications as it relates specifically to GDPR. So feel free to come by our stand. It's just right around the corner as you leave here. We'd love to talk to you more about what we do. I very much enjoyed the opportunity to present to you and very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. We really appreciated that you came all the way from Silicon Valley, came over here.
I needed to see the rain. So, we've had a drought, but I can tell you, I could do without the wind. The rain was fine. The wind was a little tough.
Yeah. And what did you try our sea? Did you swim in our sea already?
No. It was too cold.
Too cold.
Yeah.
We have to express our thanks.
Yes.
I have a little present for you,
Oh, very nice.
and it's it's written by Peter and Mark, general manager.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Very happy that you were here. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank
Larry
you very
Lunetta.
much. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.